Hey everybody, Riot Mort here, and we made it. It's time for the Teamfight Tactics Remix Rumble PBE rundown. Now, Remix Rumble is about to go to PBE. As always, it'll be sometime later today based on how PBE goes, which, I'll be honest with you, we'll see. Remix Rumble plus Arena all coming to PBE at the same time. It's going to be a little much, but we'll see how it goes. And if you don't make it onto PBE, that's okay. The set will be live in 2 weeks, and it'll be even better balanced and less bugs. So don't stress too much about it. But for those of you that do make it on, this is a video that's going to go over everything you can expect, all the new champs, traits, changes, etc., things like that, so that you can go in pretty informed. There's already been a bunch of really cool reveals, things like the Nico VTuber videos that have been out there. But if you're a turbo nerd and really want to understand everything, this video's for you. So this is gonna be a long one. Let's get started and jump right in because there's a lot. All right, you ready? First off, let's talk about champions. As always, the champion pool hasn't changed too much. 13 1 costs and things like that. In this video, I've listed them in order, tanks and then non-tanks. So you can see, for example, Taric, Tahm Kench, Kennen, Lilia, Cassante, and kind of Olaf will be your sort of frontline units that you'll be looking to build a frontline around, while Vi, Yasuo, Evelynn, Annie, Jinx, Corki, and Nami are much more about, you know, damage and utility and things like that. Some things to call out here. You get to see some of these TFT exclusive skins. We've got, you know, Kennen and Lilia and stuff like that. Those super fans. We'll talk about traits a little later. Tahm Kench is that champion that prevents a lot of flat damage, so pretty cool there. Cassante this time, not going to be knocking units out of the board, instead just going to be a tank, gains a shield for a while, and then punches back. Yasuo is a pretty exciting champion here, gains stacking AD percent based on kills, so if you like that stacking fantasy, Yasuo is going to be a cool champion for you. Annie's another pretty unique one, where after she casts her spell 4 times, she sort of charges up, gains some attack speed, and can cast 2 fireballs at once, which is pretty cool. Nami, the bubble is back. I don't know if we'll see a bubble bobble build, but that's pretty cool. So yeah, these are kind of your 1 costs you can expect. Nothing too crazy. On the 2 cost side, again, your tanks are going to be Pantheon, Garen, Gragas, and Gnar. So not a lot of 2 cost tanks. But everyone else can do a bunch of pretty cool damage here. Pantheon's pretty cool in that he kind of reflects damage, so he'll charge for a while, gain a bunch of DR, and then fire it back, which is pretty neat. Let's see here. Gnar kind of transforms and punches, so he's kind of a mix between a tank and an AD bruiser, which is pretty neat. Beyond that, some interesting ones to call out here. Katarina is actually a ranged unit this time. She's not going to be, you know, a melee unit, so she'll be throwing daggers from afar. So Katarina, a bit of a twist there. Kai'Sa, a low mana AD caster, jumps around, shoots some big bolts. Kaele's got an interesting twist on her spell. Kind of reminds me of like old Kog'Maw, where it's like 30 mana, then you're in this phase where you're doing extra damage, and then it ends with that cool ult that comes down. So that's pretty neat. Twitch throwing poison. Bard's another pretty unique one. Bard's got an interesting twist to his spell, by the way, where there is like he'll throw either healing or damage. But there's a tiny percent chance you'll also get a tip. He'll get a gold. Don't worry, you're not going to be able to like optimize it with like a full tank comp. The chance is so low, it's not worth it. But occasionally, just a random gold will pop out, and that's kind of cool. So yeah, pretty cool here. 2 costs are definitely something to build around in the mid game. Yeah. All right, on the 3 cost side, we've got Nico, Amumu, Set, Mordekaiser, Riven, and Echo as your tanks. So quite a few 3 cost tanks here. Nico kind of being that premier tank for the KDA group. She's got her own unique skin, and that's kind of why we actually had to make that, was like KDA didn't really have a tank. We kept going back to who's going to be the tank. So Nico, pretty cool that she gets to do that. Amumu is a pretty interesting champion, gains armor every time he takes damage, and then he ults. We mentioned that in the reveal, stuff like that. Mordekaiser is a pretty cool tank, especially if you can get his headliner, which we'll talk about a little later. And yeah, Samira. Samira is probably one of my favorite champions this set. Every time she gets a crit, her rating goes up. You'll see that D to C to B. And for every rating, she gains 20% attack speed, so a large amount of attack speed, so she can get going pretty crazy. And then when she casts her spell, based off that rating, it'll do more damage. So Samira, you're definitely going to want to build crit on. Lulu can turn people into cupcakes every 3 spell casts, which is neat. Lux has got her laser back. Misfortune will be a very popular champion because of Jazz, which we'll talk about later. So Misfortune, that big AD caster this time. She is an AD champion this time. I know, she's one of those confusing ones that we jump back and forth on, but definitely likes that Death Blade, that Infinity Edge, stuff like that. So yeah. And then Urgot, I think, is the other really weird one here. He's a 2-range champion. You're going to want damage on him. He's a pretty cool damage carry. All right. On to the 4 costs. Now, it might look like there's 13, but there's actually only 12. We'll talk about Akali in a second here. On the tank side, Thresh, Zac, Poppy, Blitzcrank. These champions are going to be very popular. As we know, 4-cost tanks end up in a lot of comps, and each of these have their own advantage, so definitely expect to see them in a lot of comps. Thresh is your Jarvan-like champion. He's got an AoE CC with his lasso chain. Zac's going to be pretty beefy. Poppy can actually do some decent damage if you've got Emo and Mosher in, but also a tank. And then Blitzcrank's your solid, almost like Shen, where it's like very, very tanky. So Blitzcrank, probably your best tank. On the damage side, we've got Ezreal, AD carry, low cast, but casts his ult on his 3rd cast, which is pretty cool. Caitlyn, another range champion with a really cool ult where she shoots like 4 or 5 lasers. Karthus does some big AoE damage from the backline. Twisted Fate is kind of a new take on almost like that Kaisa spell where he throws cards based on his attack speed and it hits the board, so that's pretty neat. Ahri, probably one of the more interesting champions here. Low mana, so you're definitely going to want something like blue buff on Ahri, but can really melt front lines. Every cast does some damage, and then the next cast, if they've already been hit by the first, does a lot more damage, so it can really melt through front lines. Pretty cool. And then there's Akali. Akali has a unique trait called Breakout, which basically, if you've got, KDA or True Damage active, she will swap based on that, so you can play the one that matches your comp. And each one has a slightly different spell. The KDA one is much more of an assassin type, will dive the backline with her ult, which is pretty cool. Whereas the True Damage one is much more about sort of that higher DPS, but can't quite get to the backline. So check those out. And then we have 5 costs. There's some pretty unique 5 costs here. Again, I'm not going to spoil everything, but let's see. Alawi has her own unique trait, Ill Beats, where she has placeable tentacles. These tentacles can smack every once in a while, and then when she casts her spell, do some extra damage. Ziggs is going to throw AoE bombs that do a ton of damage, as well as they use Hyper Pop and Dazzler, so pretty good utility champion. Lucian will be very popular with Jazz, AD champion. Kane has some really interesting stuff going on with Wildcard, where he changes forms based on if you win or lost last fight. And if you lost, he can try to get you some extra health back. If you won, he can try to snowball and gain you gold. So pretty interesting. Sona is a lot like, if you remember, Aphelios from, I believe, set 8, where you can place her and then choose the form you like. It can be a healing form, an attack speed form, or a damage form. So pick what you need. I'm a big fan of the healing one at 1 star and the damage one at 2 star, but whatever fits you. Kiana is an interesting champion, kind of like Tom Kench, where she can knock items off of people and steal components for you. So if you want to have those crazy YouTubers where you had 40 item components, Kiana's the champion for you. Jhin can fill your bench with violin turrets during combat and do a ton of damage. And then Yorick summons a bunch of really cool ghouls. So definitely the capstones of your comp. They're definitely tuned to be very strong. So give them a try. Yeah. All right, that's champions. Now, obviously, you can't talk about champions too much without talking about their traits. So let's go over the traits here. First off, we've got KDA. Pretty standard trait, but the way this one works is every game, when you place in KDA, you will see a board. Your board will fill with these glowing tiles, and the arrangement is different each game. But it's all pretty standard stuff that fills like the back line, the front line, just kind of the formation we want you to do that game. And if they're standing, any champion on your team, so not just the KDAs, will gain some bonus health, AD and AP. If they're KDA units, they'll gain double that. But so this is actually a pretty good splash if you want to run 3 KDA, just give your team 10% max health and AD and AP. And you'll also see our first sort of prismatic here, which is 10 KDA. Now 10 KDA will be difficult to get because there are no augments that give you +1 trait or anything like that. So you're not going to see as many prismatics as you did in the previous set. But It is a buildable spat, and you do have headliners, so what you're going to need is like the headliner, 2 buildable spats, go to level 9, stuff like that. So good luck, but if you can get it, pretty powerful trait. All right, Pentakill. Pentakill, very similar, 3, 5, 7, 10. The way this works is Pentakill champions built in have 15% DR, and then for each kill, so let's say you're running 7 Pentakill and you get your first kill, your strongest Pentakill champion will rock out and increase their bonus damage to 25%, so they'll do more damage. They'll start rocking out. On the 5th kill, all your Pentakill champions rock out, and your team gains 50% attack speed. So what's interesting about this is like 3 Pentakill can be a really good splash in the late game, because that means you're going to be able to get that Pentakill and that attack speed and stuff like that. But it also works for the vertical here. And you can see here the 3, 5, 7 is, 15, 30, 45% bonus damage. So, yeah, pretty cool. And then, yeah, this is actually the hardest to hit 10. So, like, if you're looking for your Demacia 10, if you will, Pentakill 10 is definitely going to be that. But again, it's a 10. It requires a lot to go right, and there aren't as many ways to get extra +1 traits. True damage. True damage does bonus true damage. Shocker. But that's actually a small part of their bonus. That's nothing too crazy. What's more interesting is that any champion has at least 1 item on them, kind of like the old cyber bonuses, gains a unique ability, bling bonus. So an example of this might be Yasuo, who, as long as he has 1 item, can do a 12% execute. So you want to make sure you have your items kind of spread out for this sometimes. Sometimes you don't need to fully spread it out here. For example, if you're not really playing around Senna, maybe lowering her mana cost isn't really something you need to do. But this bling bonus can open up some really cool options. And then if you can hit 9 true damage, which again, one of our prismatics harder to hit, that true damage goes up and those bling bonuses go platinum, giving an even more interesting output. So cool. All right, Disco. Disco is actually a pretty standard trait here. It's a 3, 4, 5, 6, and if you have at least 3 in, you'll get a disco ball that you can place on your board. Unlike something like Jade in the past, the disco ball is not interactable. You're not going to do damage to it. It's not a target dummy or anything like that. But any allies that start next to it gain some attack speed and healing every few seconds. And so this is a really good ramping thing. If you can, keep your units alive for a while, let's say you're running 5 disco and the fight has gone, 20 seconds, all of a sudden you've got like 80, 90% attack speed. So it can get pretty nutty. Again, if you can stall that fight. At 5 piece, you're also going to get 2 disco balls. So that's going to allow you to not have to just group around that 1 disco ball. But yeah, there you go. Continuing on. Heartsteel. Heartsteel is my personal favorite. This is the economy trait, but it's very different this time. Unlike before, where you would go on these like big 12 loss streaks and then get a big cash out, that's not going to happen this time, because every 4 player combats, it's going to auto cash out. Whether you won or lost, nothing changes that. Instead, in those 4 player combats, based on how many Heartsteel you had, how many kills you got, how many losses you got, and what stage it is, that will convert into hearts. The more hearts you get, the bigger the cash out. So for example, if you're running 3 Heartsteel and you go on a 4 loss streak on 2-1, you're not actually going to get that much. You're going to get like maybe a component if you're lucky. Nothing too crazy. But imagine it's 6-1, you're at 100 health, and all of a sudden you put in 7 Heartsteel on 6-1, and then proceed to lose the next 4 fights while also getting a few kills. Whew! That'll be a big cash out, because the multipliers go up a lot per stage. And that's the cool thing about this trait. You can actually pivot into it in the late game, trade some health for some rewards, then pivot back out of it. And that's what I love about it, is it's really flexible. You can play around Ezreal. A really common thing I'll do is, like, on my 4-2 roll down, if I hit the Heartsteel Ezreal or the Heartsteel Yone or Set, I'll play that for a few stages, do 1 cash out, then pivot back out and find a different headliner. So pretty fun. Yeah. All right. Punk. Punk is the reroll comp of the set, if you will. If you're one of those people that likes staying level 5 and rerolling for a long time, Punk is for you, because it's a 1-1, 2-2 champions, and it can go 2, 4, 6. But here's what's interesting. If you play Punk at all, let's say you play 2 Punk, the next fight, the next combat planning phase, you'll get a 1 cost reroll instead of a 2 cost. It's like your reroll will cost 1 less gold. And every time you reroll, you are going to increase your bonus on this trait. So for example, it asks you every turn to at least press reroll once to get that 3% bonus. But let's say you reroll a few more times, you can go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc., etc. And this trait will stack up. I've seen it as high as, by the end game, you can hit like 1200 health and 120 AD. So it can get pretty nutty if you've got reroll. Works great with things like Golden Ticket. But yeah, you can get these really big reroll bonuses. So if you like pressing reroll, give Punk a try. All right, 8-bit. 8-bit's another interesting trait because it's kind of your flat AD of the trait. But the difference is based on the damage your team deals, this is going to ramp up over time. And so, you'll literally get to see a high score meter. There's this like arcade machine that sits on your board. And the more damage you deal, the higher this goes. And there'll be these breakpoints basically where every time it's going to stack up, and you can see up to 20 times. So for example, if you're running 2 8-bit and you get this to the max stack, this is going to give an additional, I believe it's like 35% AD, which for a 2-piece trait is pretty good. And you can get this pretty high here. And if you can somehow reach the 20th tier and have 6 8-bit in, you will hit a grand prize, which is kind of fun. It's pretty hard to do though without like a 3-star 4 cost. But it's possible. You have to do a lot of damage. It's kind of fun to see how much damage you did in totality across the entire game. So, all right, country. Country is our summon trait, as I mentioned on sort of like the broadcast. It's a pretty easy trait to play. You play around Urgot and Samira. You play Thresh as kind of your front line, and you get that Hecarim that comes in. The Hecarim powers up at 3 and 5, providing extra power to your team. And if you can get 7, which is pretty tough because you need a headliner and an emblem, and again, as I said, emblems are pretty rare this time. It's not a craftable emblem, but there are still occasional things like a tome drop and stuff like that. So if you can get 7, the Hecarim gets pretty big. But yeah, so should remind you a lot of Cultist Galio. All right, Emo. Emo champions' abilities cost less mana to cast, and they gain mana whenever an ally dies. So, for example, if you're running 4 Emo, your Annie's ability is going to cost 25% less, and then every time an ally dies, she gains, some extra mana to cast even quicker. And as I mentioned, Annie's a champion where once she casts 4 times, then she starts doing empowered casts, and so that's why you want Emo to kind of do that. The other thing worth calling out here is that there is an Emo emblem. So, for example, if you want to run Karthus with an Emo emblem, that's a really cool combination because now Karthus's mana cost goes down 25%, which is a lot. And then, you also gain that mana on kill. So, if you can get an Emo emblem, stay on the lookout for that one. It's a powerful one. All right, EDM. This is the most complicated trait of the set. Milk, if you're watching, this is the thing that you should be liking. This is like Legend. It's a pretty complicated trait. But the way it works is there are 4 EDM champs. There's no emblem. You can't get an emblem on this one. You're going to pick one of them to sample from. So let's say you pick Lux. At a specific frequency, so a certain time, it's tuned per champion, so each champion has a different amount. All of the EDM's champions will transform and cast that ability. So, for example, if you have all 4 of these EDM champions on the board, and you have Lux as your sample, every, I believe it's 6 seconds, I could be wrong, that number might be incorrect, all these champions will cast Lux's ability. And so you'll get these 4 lasers going, doo! Or you could do it with Zac, and all of a sudden, all 4 of them will transform into Zac and start bouncing around doing their ult and then go back. And so it's pretty cool to see them all kind of play off of each other. And you can see here as you have more of the trait, if you go all the way up to like 4-piece, they'll do that more often and they'll do it stronger. So pretty neat trait, but pretty tough to play around. I don't recommend playing it your first game unless something goes very right. But there are some pretty cool builds where you can position and play around and do some cool stuff. We've even seen really weird versions where like you keep your Zed trapped so it samples more often. This is definitely the most complicated trait. All right, Jazz. This is going to be the most popular trait for all of you turbo nerds. Do you guys remember Stand United, the augment that said the more traits you play, the stronger it gets? And Challenger players love that. It's a trait now. Jazz says for each non-unique trait active, your team gains bonus health and bonus damage. So late game, it is very common to play something like Lucian and Misfortune for 2 Jazz, and then try to splash in 2 Guardian, 2 Sentinel, 2 Big Shot, 2 whatever, and have this long trait web with a powerful Jazz comp. And then you can get the emblem, which is a buildable emblem, and then you can make that a really cool endgame comp with a very wide set of traits. So pretty neat. Like I said, I think you're going to see a lot of Jazz, especially in Challenger lobbies. We've had to keep toning this one down, but you're going to love this trait. I expect to see a ton of Jazz. Hyper Pop, pretty simple one here, and adds some extra utility to Lulu and Ziggs. When they cast an ability, they grant mana and attack speed to their 2 closest allies. So if you ever want to make mana battery Lulu, here you go. If you run both of them, that goes up. And then if you can somehow get an emblem and a headliner, you can get up to 4 Hyper Pop, and that can get pretty wild here. So definitely check that out. My favorite is if you can get like Hyper Pop Ari, play that with the Lulu, play some Spellweaver, play that with Ziggs, and get like pretty crazy. You can get these really cool comps going where your casters are going nutty. So pretty fun trait. All right, on to classes. Big Shot. This is your pretty standard AD class, a lot of spell casting. Basically, the way this works is they get some bonus attack damage. So let's say you're running 4. It'll be 15% attack damage, nothing crazy. But then when they cast their ability, that will quadruple. That'll go up to 60%, but that does include the spell. So let's say Misfortune casts. That cast will be with 60% AD, and then for the next 3 seconds as well. So you'll get your spell plus a few big autos, then it'll go back down to normal. So kind of a cool twist on flat AD. Bruisers are back. Your team gains 100 bonus health. Really good to splash in 2 Bruiser, especially for your Jazz comps. Otherwise, they gain health. They're back. There's no 8 Bruiser yet. We'll see. And there's no 3 Bruiser, so you can go back to memeing me now. All right, Crowd Diver. Now, when people read this, I'm sure you're thinking, uh-oh, it's Assassins. Nope. That's not how it works this time. Crowd Divers, the way it works is they gain some bonus damage. So let's say you're running 2 Crowd Diver. They gain 5% bonus damage. Every second they're alive, that's going to go up. So it's going to go 6%, 7%, 8%, etc. They're ramping. They actually do ramping damage. So the longer you can keep them alive, the more damage that you deal. Now here's the twist. When Crowd Divers die, what they will do is they will leap onto like the back line, onto the furthest enemy, and they'll do this like AoE slam that will stun enemies for 1.5 seconds, and then they die. They're gone, right? So there's no like jumping to the backline and casting their spells or anything, but they do provide some good backline disruption. And it's really funny if you're running like 4 Crowd Diver, and as they die, you just like repeatedly stun the enemy carry. So that could be pretty funny. But I don't necessarily recommend playing it as like a 6-piece right away. But it is nice to splash 2 of them and get that backline utility. So again, not an assassin trait, but still some interesting backline disruption. Let us know what you think on this twist. Again, we've talked about how there won't be any assassins this set. This is the closest to it. But yeah, let us know. All right, Dazzlers. Dazzlers are back. And again, very good splash here because their abilities reduce their target's damage by 15%. So it's going to make your enemy do less damage, which is nice. And then they also do some additional damage to their spell. It'll basically imagine if you hit somebody for 100 with your spell, at 2-piece you'll see some extra ticks that will make another 20 damage. So just some extra like bleed on top of it. Can be really nice, really good with Ziggs. Ziggs can hit like a wide part of the board. Twisted Fate also uses it pretty well. So yeah, Dazzlers. All right, Sentinel. Sentinel is going to be one of the more popular splashes. It gives your entire team armor and MR, so 2 Sentinel very valuable to get 16 armor and MR, and Sentinels gain double that. So kind of like Bastion in that regard. So, you know, you run a 4-piece Sentinel, they're going to have 70 armor and MR, which is a lot of tankiness. So otherwise, pretty standard trait here. Edgelord, this one's interesting. Edgelords gain attack speed, so they'll gain, 25% attack speed at 3. If their target drops below half health, that will double, so they'll get this like double for a bit. And if they're within 1 hex range, so basically if they're in melee range, which means if you're going like, a range thing or you've got a bunch of snipers focuses, it's not going to work. But they'll actually dash and slash through and move themselves closer to the back line. So definitely makes melee edgelords pretty powerful. Yeah. Executioner. Executioner means your abilities can critically strike, and they gain critical strike damage. So if you want your Samira spell to crit, make sure you run 2 Executioner. And then the lower their opponent's health, they get increased critical strike damage. So, or critical strike chance, excuse me. So that means they're going to crit more often against lower health targets, aka Executioner. Nothing crazy. Mosher. Mosher is kind of a weird comp. I don't recommend playing it vertical yet, unless you get an emblem or 2. There's a lot of melee champions in Mosher, but the Moshers gain attack speed and Omnivamp, which increases based on how low they are. So if you're missing half your health, it increases 50%. But again, that's pretty cool for champions like Jax, champions like Urgot, stuff like that. Even Poppy can actually use the attack speed. Poppy has very high base AD. So, but the problem is if you run 6 of them, you have 6 melee champions. It can get a little gross. So, all right, Spellweaver, our typical AP comp here, pretty basic. The one thing worth noting here is that 3-piece Spellweaver gives your entire team 15 AP. So it's a very good splash to try to run 3 Spellweaver. Then if you're running more than that, you also gain more. So for example, if you're running 3 Spellweaver, your Spellweavers have 35 ability power. And then every time a Spellweaver casts a spell, they get +1. So this is one of those, like, if everyone's casting and casting and casting, it could snowball pretty out of control. Ari's the best for this. She's got that low mana cost. But really, Annie can do it pretty well too. A really cool version of this is you run like 7 Spellweaver, and then everyone's building up that AP, and then Sona with the damage casts her spell, wipes the board. So pretty neat. And Spellweavers are one class that does have a prismatic. If you can get 10 Spellweaver, cool. Yeah, good luck. But if you can, it's pretty powerful. All right, Guardian. Guardian's back, pretty standard. Once per combat at 50% health. Guardians shield themselves and their closest ally for a % of max health. So if you're running 4 Guardian and Tarek drops below half health, he'll shield himself and 1 ally, which can be a lot of health to chew through. Don't try to run this like 8, or honestly even 6 can be a little nutty. But if you wanted to run something that's really ramping, 6 Guardian, 2 Emo Annie, for example, can ramp up and get that Annie doing a lot of damage. But yeah, pretty standard tank trait. All right, Superfan. This is an interesting one. Superfan is a 1-1-2-3, so kind of leans itself into rerolling, but not completely. And the way Superfans work is they love your headliner. Whoever your headliner is, it could be Karthus, it could be Ari, it could be one of them, it doesn't matter. They're going to improve your headliner. So much like Demacia, if you're running 3 headliner, let's say you're running Kennen, Lilia, and Gnar, and your headliner is Evelynn, at 3-piece, Evelynn will get a custom-tailored item added on. Again, much like Demacia. So, whoops, that's my wake-up alarm. Sorry about that. So, every Superfan will get... every champion has their own item. We'll publish that list at some point, but they'll get a cool item. So, really good in the early game. If you're running 4 Superfan, your headliner also gains extra health and Omnivamp. And then if you can run 5 Superfan, that item will turn Radiant. So a common build of this is like 4 Superfan, 5 KDA, run like a headliner Ari, you're going to get a free item, your Ari's going to get some Omnivamp, stuff like that. So Superfans are a cool splash into any comp to try to get your headliner looking real good. Rapid Fire, pretty basic here. Your team gains attack speed, they gain more attack speed. It's a ramping attack speed trait. Attack speed. Okay, that's it for champs and traits. Let's talk about the set mechanics. First up, Headliner. If you haven't heard by now, Chosen is back, but now it's called Headliners. There's quite a bit different here, but the first thing you'll notice is that there are Headliners in your shop, and you can see here Caitlyn. They come at 2-star, and before you ask, yes, we tested it at 1-star. It does very bad things to the game. Didn't work out. So 2-star Caitlyn, there she is. One of her traits will be glowing. So if you take this, Rapid Fire gets +1. And then she'll be 2-star. And then the other thing is you can mouse over them and you can see their ability. Headliner effect plus 10% AD, and her ult hits 1 additional shot. So instead of 4, I believe it's 5. And you can see that for every champion. Every champion has a unique headliner effect. You're going to want a headliner on your board. Yeah. So headliner's back. There are some other details. I don't remember if I put a slide in. Hang on. Let me... Oh, Kent! All right. Kent was in my deck. Thanks, Kent. Kent's clearly excited. Lilia with a custom skin. See? You give Kent a little power. This is what he does. All right. Back on track. Headliners have a unique effect, as I mentioned. And everyone is custom tailored this time, which is nice because as we're trying to balance the game, if something's off, we can very clearly adjust it, right? If hypothetically, let's say Cassante is just the best tank in the game, there's a clear lever here, in addition to their spell, their headliner effect. So this is really nice. And as you can see, a lot of them are pretty basic. So like Corky's AD, Tom Kench's health, Cassante has health. Others can be more interesting, right? Like Jinx, for example, minigun grants an extra 1% attack speed, rocket launcher attacks deal an extra 10% damage. Cool. Yasuo gains Omnivamp. Bard, at combat start, for every 8 times Bard has cast, play a Doot. Pretty interesting. So yeah, you can look through all these. I'll keep the slide up here for just a second. But like I said, some are unique, some are basic. But again, having a nice lever for every headliner. So good. So good. 3 and 4 costs, same thing. You can see they start to scale a little bit, but nothing too crazy. You know, even in this world, what are we seeing? And 4 costs actually go down in power a little bit because 4 costs themselves are already very strong. You can see, for example, Vex is 25% bonus ability power, while Ahri is 15% bonus ability power. And again, that's intentional, right? This is very clear balance levers to try to make certain strategies more or less dominant. We can have good control over this. So for those of you that are very worried about the balance, even if we don't nail it perfectly, there are plenty of ways to get things in the right spot here. So I'm feeling very confident about our ability to adjust. Some fun ones here. Blitzcrank, passive zaps also deal additional max health magic damage. Amumu, I think, is one of the crazier ones. Remember how I mentioned Amumu gains armor when he's hit? Headliner Amumu also gains MR. So tanky on both axes, can end up being really good. Mordekaiser's another one. 200 health, 5% of bonus ability power. When he solo kills, gain 2% permanent ability power. So you can actually make a carry Mordekaiser if you get the headliner Mordekaiser pretty early. So pretty fun. Yeah. And then we have our 5 costs. Obviously with the 5 costs, we had to do something a little more unique sometimes. For example, Sona, every attack increases her attack speed by 2%. She attacks a lot. She's actually a really good Ginsu's user, so this is pretty good for her. Kiana, when Kiana copies an item, grant her 5% bonus attack damage. Yorick, summon 2 extra zombies. The big zombie is bigger. That's pretty fun. So, yeah. There you go. There's your headliner effects. One last thing about headliners before we move on, since I guess I didn't have a slide in there, is that the way headliners work is if you do not have a headliner, every single shop will have a headliner. The right side, it'll always be that slot, which means you have a 100% drop rate. If you do have a headliner, what'll happen is in 1 out of every 4 shops, it will be there. Now, what that does mean is you are going to be slightly nerfed. You're only going to see 19 units instead of 20, because you can't, like, let's say you're playing KDA and you have a Nico headliner you're very happy with. Cool. And then you see an Ahri headliner in your shop, but you just want the basic Ahri unit. Sorry, you can't. That's just not how it works. The other thing to note is if you see a headliner you like and you try to buy it, what'll happen is the game will say, nope, you got to sell your old one first. So no mistakes, things like that. Again, very confident in the system though. There will be some slight feels bads, but overall it is a massive improvement to headliners and allows you a lot of flexibility. So, all right. Portals are back. Portals are this time much more subdued though. You can see here we're not doing anything crazy like House Light Shield or anything like that. And instead we are focused on, you know, just a slight modification to the game. So start with a completed item anvil. Cool. Player health increase. Cool. There's some new ones here like multi-talented though. So, and the way it's going to work is when we ship, there are going to be these portals. So you can get a full list here. And again, nothing too crazy here. A lot of augment control. Your first augment this game will be gold. All augments this game will be silver. The last augment of this game will be prismatic, stuff like that. Some basic champion ones. Start with a 3-cost champion. Start with a champion duplicator. Start with a 3 random 1-cost champions. Some gold ones. Every time you select an augment, gain 3 gold. That one's back. Every time you build an item, gain 2 gold. So it's back but nerfed. Pot of gold is fun. This one's just fun. I don't think it's actually that insane. But at 6-1, all living players split a pot of 120 gold. So if there's only 3 people left alive, you gain 40 gold. Cool. But otherwise, the rest of the game's pretty normal. Item ones, start with 1 artifact anvil, start with 2 component anvils, radiant item, start with a completed item anvil. So again, nothing too wild here. Scuttle Puddle is back. That's probably the most wild one. Let's see here. Player health increase. Champions on carousel hold 2 items instead of 1 is back. Start with a training dummy. Your team gains 10% attack speed and bonus movement speed. And then we have our 2 new ones that kind of work with the headliner system. Headliners appear in your shop as if you were 1 level higher, so you can get much more powerful headliners early. And multi-talented, headliners grant +1 to another one of their traits. So that Caitlyn, for example, could give +1 8-bit and rapid fire. That one's a fun one. So, yeah. And then the other thing to note here is that we are planning in a later patch, probably right after Christmas break, we're going to add some more. We wanted to keep these separate from the game for now. We don't want everything going crazy your very first game. So some of the more crazy portals we're going to hold back, but we do want to make it very clear they might even be on PBE to test for a bit, but these will not be there at launch. They will not be there for the Vegas Open. So you can see silver, gold, prismatic, random champion, and none of these are even that crazy, but we purposely just wanted to hold back a few and not go nuts right at the beginning. Start with a spatula, start with a tactician's crown. Every stage, all players gain random loot from a highly varied pool. The Tome of Traits one in particular, that's one I'd like us to hold back. The Treasure Armory, Radiant Blessing, stuff like that. So those will come. If you have any other portals you're sad or leaving or something like that, let us know. But yeah, portals. All right, augments. Augments are back. I'm not going to go over every augment, and to be honest, some of these numbers might be incorrect. Things have been getting adjusted as we go, so bear with me here. Again, some might not be correct, but what you're going to see here is a lot of augments this set are not new, but there's 2 main changes to call out. The first is anything that granted +1 to a trait. So this is Wandering Trainer, Ancient Archives, a trait Heart, Soul, Crown, anything in that space, gone. Even Tacticians, the one that gives you 2 spatulas plus a component, even that's gone. You're not going to be able to get +1 traits from your augments this set. That's going to be reserved for the headliner space. The other thing is that there are a few new augments, around 40, 45 new augments, give or take. We've also made some adjustments here. For example, I think it's on this slide or the next slide, but oh yeah, bronze ticket is now properly called silver ticket. Golden ticket is now properly called prismatic ticket. We did some renaming. You can see some of the headliner, or sorry, some of the legend augments have stuck around, but now they just appear randomly. But yeah, pretty standard stuff here. Nothing on this page worth calling out, I think. Sticks and Stones, probably a pretty powerful one here. Your champions without items shred and sunder enemies. So if you need shred and sunder, Sticks and Stones is a very good silver. Sunfire Touch has been renamed. That used to be red buff. We'll talk about that later. Vampirism, your units gain 20 health, gain additional 9 health, and 1% Omnivamp per 5 missing Tactician health. So a different take on that Vladimir Legend Augment. Yeah. Couple more silvers. Again, nothing too crazy here. One thing to call out here is like cutting corners level up. They don't say get to level 10 anymore because you can get to level 10. We'll talk about that a little later. Others have been adjusted, like late game specialist here. When you reach level 9, gain 35 gold instead of 44 because getting to level 9 is easier now. Stuff like that. Young, Wild, and Free, slightly nerfed. So tried to balance some of the augments a little bit better. Stim Pack is one of my favorite ones here, by the way. After your Tactician loses 50 health, gain 4 item components. 4 item components for a silver, pretty good, but you don't get it till late game. So that's a fun one. And there are your silvers. Here's your golds. Again, nothing too crazy. A lot of slight balance adjustments, a lot of things that you've seen before. So we didn't do a big reinvention this set. but I'm just looking through here, seeing if there's any on this page worth calling out here. Some got a lot of twists. For example, here, big gains replaces endurance training, but now big gains is every 2 takedowns instead of every 1 kill, which means it's actually much stronger and gives it to the whole team because they're all helping with those takedowns. So I think big gains and learning to spell are going to be very good here. Yeah, little buddies, your tier 4 and 5 champions gain 10% attack speed for every tier 1 and 2 champion you field. So what you can do here is like play Caitlyn with a bunch of tier 1 and 2 champions and have a very high attack speed Caitlyn. Kind of an interesting augment there. Heroic Grab Bag, gain 2 lesser duplicators. I think this is available on 2-1, so that's an interesting one. Yeah, you can see some of the new ones here. Crown Guarded, gain a Crown Guard. Your Crown Guard start of combat and bonus AP effects are 50% stronger. Oh, Shock Treatment. This is a favorite one. If you ever liked the Pikachu builds, Shock Treatment is back, or new one. Gain a Static Shiv. Its Chain Lightning effect does 100 to 200% increased damage based on stage level. So expect some fun rapid fire Static Shiv builds with that one. Few more gold augments. Again, nothing too crazy here. Three's Company, etc., etc. I'm just leaving it up here so you can see. But again, Golden Ticket used to be called Silver Ticket. Idealism, Gargantuan Resolve, all sticking around. Escort Quest. Here's a fun new one. Crash Test Dummies. At the start of combat, your target dummies launch themselves towards the largest clump of enemies, stunning units near them for 2 seconds. Gain 2 target dummies. This augment, by the way, insanely good on stage 2. During our playtest, a lot of the people were saying it's kind of overpowered as far as win streaking because two dummies on stage 2 is a little nutty. I'm actually, keep your eye on this augment, but if you take this, it might be a free win streak because not only do they then jump in and stun, but they kind of become the target, and so they're pretty powerful. Take a look at that one. And then you start to see some of the trait augments. There is 1 trait augment for each trait. So for example here, Bigger Shot. Every 3rd basic attack from Big Shot explodes, dealing 160% attack damage to nearby enemies. Rapid Fire can now stack up to 20 times. We also explicitly call out which units you're going to gain this time, so no more gain 2 Rapid Fire units. It now says gain a Jinx and a Senna, so that should be kind of nice. But yeah, more gold augments here. Do it for the fans. Your Headliner's damage heals your super fans for 15% of the damage dealt. That's Jazz Baby. This augment I think is going to be insane. At the beginning of combat, your Jazz champions gain permanent bonuses based on the number of traits you have active. So, for example, if you can find an early Misfortune, you can start sacking her with health, attack speed, and even AD and AP, ending up with a very powerful Misfortune. I'm a big fan of that one. Heart Collector. If you can get a 2-1 Heart Steal with this augment, you're going to have some fun because every time you cash out, you'll get to keep 20% of the hearts. So your cash outs will get slightly bigger, slightly bigger, slightly bigger. I'm a big fan of Heart Collector. That's a fun one. So yeah. Insert Coins, another fun one. Your 8-bit units execute enemies below 10% health and have an 8% chance to drop 2 gold, increased by 1% for each 8-bit high score achieved. So as your score goes up, you get more and more gold. Kind of fun. Yeah. There you go. Bunch of gold augments. On to Prismatic. Again, nothing too wild here. A lot of what you'd expect already. A lot of stuff already working. You can see Prismatic Ticket, no longer called Gold Ticket. Here's an interesting one. Hologram. Your Headliner champion is cloned. You cannot equip items on them. So if you remember that old, I forget the name of it, but the one that would clone like your highest health champion, now you can specifically clone your Headliner, which can be kind of fun. Determined Investor. I forgot to call this one out, but you can get Diamond Hands. Some of the other Shimmer items are back through other augments as well. I think I missed one in the gold space, but they're definitely there. Going Long. This one's an interesting one. You no longer gain interest. At the start of your turn, gain 5 XP. So kind of a different take on March of Progress. So that one's pretty fun. Birthday Present still around. Let's see here. Just trying to see if there's any other ones. Caretaker's Chosen is back, but now it's level 8 for that Radiant Item Armory since getting to level 8 is a little easier. Yeah, nothing else too crazy on this page. Yep, you can see here Prismatics. Trying to look, nothing too crazy here. Yeah. So again, Not a ton of new augments, but some new toys to play with, some old ones. And again, a lot better balance we're hoping this time, based around the units. So, yeah. All right, that's it for augments. On the system side, couple things worth calling out here. The first big one is, as I've mentioned, the leveling changes. Level 10 is now the max you can achieve, not level 9. But it's now easier to get to level 6, it's easier to get to level 7, it's a lot easier to get to 8, and it's a decent chunk easier to get to 9. So you can see here those XP curves have gone down. 10 still requires 80 XP, but in exchange, and the way this works is that each of those kind of got nerfed. So level 7, for example, used to be 15% 4 cost, now it's only 10%. Level 7 is where you go to get 3 costs, not 4 costs. So if you really want to be playing 4 costs, don't roll on level 7, go to 8. But going to 8 is much easier now, it's only 48 XP. I think a lot of games, if you're fast 8ing, you will be 8 on 4-2. You will have plenty of gold to roll, find a headliner, should be good. So you can see here, there's some of the adjustments. We also lowered player damage a little for big swings. So for example, in stage 2, let's say you lose by 4 units. You used to take 8 damage, now you take 7. So big losses got nerfed a little bit by 1 damage. So player damage shouldn't be too much of an insane thing here. On the bag sizes, we've actually been testing a bunch of different iterations of the bag sizes. What you're going to be playing on PBE is actually all the normal bag sizes that before, 29, 22, 18, 11, 10. So there will only be 11 4 costs, not 12. Other than that, it's basically the same. So a lot of our PBE testers were testing a version that had much lower bag changes, but for now we've pulled those and we're going to take a look how this goes. And then the last one here is excess critical strike change is now converted at 50% instead of 80%. We found this was causing a lot of problems, especially with our new executioner, and you're going to see a change later with Infinity Edge and Jeweled Gauntlet that make it a lot less problematic. So there's some small system changes here, but the leveling one is pretty big. It will change the tempo of when you level. I think, again, very commonly you're going to see some 4-2 level 8s. So, yeah. All right, items. There's some big changes here. So 2 items have been replaced. RFC is gone, but Sniper's Focus remains. So if you want +1 range, you can still get it. You just can't force it with bows. RFC has been replaced with Red Buff. Gain 35% attack speed, 5% bonus damage, and your attacks and abilities apply burn and wound. So Sunfire, Morello, and now Red Buff definitely give you some different options here. Plus that chunk of attack speed and bonus damage is pretty good. Night Harvester is replaced, as I kind of hinted at. Glove not having a tank item was really kind of awkward, so now Glove has a tank item. 250 health, 20 armor, 20 crit, not that you need the crit. Take 8% less damage, while above 50% health, take 15% less damage instead. So flat DR on an item can be very powerful, and there's the Radiant versions as well. So 2 new items to play with, and there you go. In addition, we made some changes to the base items here. Bramble Vest, a little less armor, but now gain 5% max health. And we've just flattened the damage. The star scaling was an ancient system that didn't really need to be there. So Bramble Vest, little extra health, little less armor. Pretty cool. Blue Buff. This one got kind of a nerf, if you will, but also kind of a buff. You still get your -10 mana. That was good. But you don't gain another 10 mana on takedown. It was leading to the situations where like really low mana people like Cassiopeia were just casting way too frequently. So that's gone. But instead, when you get a takedown, deal 12% more damage for 8 seconds. So still a very good damage item, still should be good. And now the difference between Blue Buff and Shojin should be pretty healthy. A 30 mana user, Blue Buff takes them to 20, Shojin 15 per auto, both good, should be fine. Quicksilver. Quicksilver felt like the one item you'd never want to slam. We're trying to fix that here. So 30% attack speed, 20% crit, 20 MR. But here's the new twist. At the combat start, you gain immunity to crowd control for 14 seconds. So it has been nerfed a little. But during this time, you gain 6% attack speed every 2 seconds. Meaning, at 14 seconds, you have gained 42% attack speed. So you have a lot of attack speed now. And then that stays. That stays once the Quicksilver effect wears off. So it's kind of a ramping attack speed item now. You can slam this on 2-1, be happy with that big burst of attack speed. So should be a lot better. I think melee champions especially are going to love this item this set. Deathblade, Rabadon's Death Cap have both had their AD and AP lowered a bit, but now gain 8% bonus damage to make them much more attractive options if you already have a bunch of AP or AD. Warmog's Armor, same thing, a little less health, but also gain 8% max health. Really good on Brawler Bruiser, obviously, but also just like if you've got a bunch of health, should allow this item to scale, be good on 3-star champions, not necessarily so 1-star skewed. Infinity Edge and Jeweled Gauntlet. Abilities can critical strike. If you already have this, gain 10% critical strike damage instead. So now if you have, Jeweled Lotus and you already built IE, it's not as badly wasted. You're going to gain some extra critical strike damage. Should be good. Morellonomicon allows attacks and abilities to 1% burn and 33% wound. All is good there. Dragon's Claw, much like Warmog's, has that 5% max health, a little less MR. And then Ginsu's little less starting attack speed, but 1% more per stack. So Ginsu's gets to be a little stronger this set. And then here are the Radiant versions of all those. You can see here. Even Shroud gets a bit of a change at its Radiant as well. Nothing too crazy. Yep. And there you go. Bunch of Radiant items. Morello still doing the 3% burn, which is kind of cool. Yeah. Exciting stuff. All right, and then some artifact changes. Nothing too crazy. Sniper's Focus now, the best way to get +1 range. Getting adjusted there. Hull Crusher, slight numbers adjustment here. Deathfire Grasp. The increased 50% damage was a little nutty, so Deathfire Grasp gets a bit of a nerf. Mogul's Mail, slight adjustment to the amount of stacks. Yeah, there you go. Artifact changes. Let's see here. Goldmancer Staff gets a little bit of adjustment as well for the gold drop. Banshees now gives attack speed and CC immunity, not just CC immunity. I think Banshee's Veil, very powerful support item. Yeah. And that's it. That's a lot of what you can expect. Again, could go into more detail on like specific champs and abilities, but we want you to discover a lot of that and enjoy it. So, should be a very fun set. As always with PBE, not going to claim it's perfect on the day. Let us know if you see any bugs. Let us know if you see any balance issues. We've been working really hard to make sure this is right. So, yeah, should be fun. Yeah, that's it, I think. So, all right, it's like 5:30 in the morning. Hopefully you guys enjoy this video. It should be up in a few hours, and then PBE a few hours after that, and everyone will be playing. So it'll be great. Oh, last thing to call out, make sure you play the game with sound on. It's very important. This music system, I'm telling you, it's going to blow your mind. So play with sound on, enjoy the music. It's really cool. Every time I put Jin in and I hear that violin, it's so good. So good. So, all right. That's going to do it for me. Hopefully you guys enjoy PBE. Yeah. All right. Until next time, take it easy.